Post COVID, a bunch of new musicians came on the scene. I'm seeing it on the used market where you see like really nice guitars with really shitty amps. And I know right away that's someone who picked up the guitar during the
Yeah.
pandemic. They bought a beautiful Les Paul, $2,000 Les Paul with like a Roland, little, practice amp. And you go, okay, this is someone who started picking up the guitar and now has just quit. He's trying to get their money back on their investment. And even the used market right now is so stale, it's hard to sell stuff. Like I've put a bunch of stuff for sale and everyone is kind of like tire kickers. Hey, would you be able to knock this down like 100%? Like, no.
What?
I'm trying to sell this. I'm not trying to give it away. And so then you're sitting, like you can see, I got a lot of gear, right? So I'm sitting on a lot of gear that I would like to move, but even I'm having a hard time moving it. And companies are having a hard time, positioning themselves with sales because they don't have enough or they have too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really weird time for gear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I actually found a couple of numbers. There's a magazine called Music Trades, which is kind of an insider MI magazine that does market research essentially, and they looked at a couple of numbers, and that's from exactly 1 year ago, because obviously it takes some time to study what happened the previous year and so on and so forth. But in the third quarter of 22, which is where we're in the third quarter of 20. No, we're in the fourth quarter actually. Sorry. But in the third quarter of 22, the sales were already about 7% lower than the previous year for fretted instruments. Let me see. Instrument amplifiers 5.6. Sound reinforcement products 6.5. Electronic music 4.5. Percussion products 2.2, didn't take that much of a hit. Recording products 10.2%. That's the other thing. A lot of people also bought like interfaces because they were like, I'm at home. Why not upgrade my recording rig? And then start recording. But then, obviously, in the beginning of 22, all the restrictions were currently gone. People were able to travel again. People were able to get together. I know it by myself because we were able to travel again. We traveled down to Chile for 3 months. All restrictions were gone, and suddenly we also had like the conflict starting in the Ukraine. Like the war in the Ukraine started in February, and then throughout last year, it had a big impact, like on macroeconomics, where like gas prices were suddenly rising. People predicted that because Europe is so dependent on oil and gas from Russia, mainly gas though, that those prices would rise. And I don't want to see. Oh, I'm going to get my bill for last year pretty soon. I don't want to see that. It's going to be terrible because gas was so expensive last year, and the place where I live has a gas heating system. So people held back on all the expenses that had to do with what's not necessary. What's necessary is you need a roof over your head. You need to pay for the expenses connected with it. You need a car maybe because you live in an area where there's no public transportation, and you need to eat. You need to eat, and you need to enjoy yourself from time to time. So people cut back on all of that, and you suddenly, especially around like quarter 3 and 4 of last year, you saw a major increase and almost saturation of the used market. People were getting rid of their stuff.
Yeah, they were getting rid of it, and there's this other thing that I think is coming to the surface is seeing how guitar and gear I'm going to say it, the vast majority of us is a hobby. There's only a handful of like professionals who go out on tour and they make their living with this, they don't represent the majority of sales, right? So when you're like in the excess and you got all this like fancy gear and stuff like this, when you're going through hard times, you can't say, well, I got a choice here. I can keep my 20 Tube Screamer Klons that are handmade in this country or whatever, and I think I'm going to keep it. No, you have to liquidate stuff, so you sell it. And oftentimes when times are hard, you sell stuff at a loss for you, at a benefit for the buyer, and then they're happy with their purchase, but you're not making a ton of money. So there's no return on investment on what you're selling, because you're not selling at a time where you can sit on it for a few days or a few weeks. Yeah. But when you got something up for sale for 6 months, things don't look good for your sales. People are not buying it. So if you've got like an amp on Facebook Marketplace, it's a beautiful, hand wired amp and all this stuff, and you're asking $3,000, and you got like 2,000 clicks on it, but no one's ever written you. Time to rethink your price point, because you're not moving it. And for the other people looking at it, they're like, oh, it's a great looking amp. I can't afford to put this in my house. I just play for the fun of it. What am I going to do with a 100-watt beast? So that's the other consideration.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of have to distinguish a little bit between the used market and the new market, because essentially the market of new musical instruments has declined over the course of the past 1.5 years, because people were able to go out again. And especially this year, people spent money on things they could experience. They went on vacation. All the festivals in Europe were almost sold out. Concerts, people are going to concerts again. Yeah. People want to spend money on that kind of stuff and not spend money on a pedal or something. And to your point with the used inventory, yeah, 100%. There is also a different mentality when it comes to used in different parts of the world. Like, I know that in the US, for example, if you sell something used, you got to knock off at least, like from the start, a third of the price. You got to knock it off. You look at, okay, the item is 1,000 new, I'll sell it at 650. And normally from there on, it still goes a little bit down through a negotiation or something. In Europe, and I can tell you from my experience in Germany, people have a very weird setting on what they think their used gear is worth. So people buy something for 1,000 euros, and then they have it for like a year, and it's in good condition. So they're like, well, I'm going to sell it for 900. Like, nobody's going to buy it for 900 because it's a year old. And for 100 euros more, they could get the same thing if the price has not declined by then. But let's say the price, just for the sake of the argument, the price is still 1,000. They could get the same thing, but with full warranty for 100 euros more. So they won't buy it for like 900. Why would they? So there's a weird perception about this. But what people are definitely clever about is about the availability factor. Depending on what you're selling and how much available there is in your region, you might still be able to get a shit ton of money